We got to get to this point, but it takes people like Lincoln standing up for the enslaved to make sure that this institution goes away. And I love this quote. It says, "Where slavery is, there liberty cannot be. And where liberty is, there slavery cannot be."
Sitting in the back of Justin Emmerich's 8th grade history class in small-town Ohio, I tried to remember how many lessons like his I'd heard at 13.
If we want to have a country that is based on freedom and liberty are the same thing, can you have an institution of slavery? 4 million enslaved people in a country that sells itself as being for liberty.
How many times in middle school did I hear a lesson about things as mentally, emotionally, and historically complicated as slavery and race, and have an instructor ask for and care about my interpretation?
Here's what I want. Shove your desks together. Shove your desks together. I want you to go straight to the corroboration page.
Not very many.
You started to see a lot of students start to clam up, and when asked how many times they discussed it, that was maybe the only time for probably more than half of the students they'd ever mentioned the word.
He introduces his students to the concept of slavery early on in the year.
We're 6-ish weeks in.
Yeah.
Why are we already just laying all this down?
I mean, if you know it and you don't tell them, you're lying to your students.
Is that the truth that no one is willing to say? You're
What truth?
lying to your students if you don't teach this.
I don't know. I think it comes down to almost a lack of respect for your kids when you're shielding it because you're worried about them emotionally. I'm more worried about the emotions of when they're 25 and they find out about it and they feel like they've been lied to.
To remain faithful to history, Mr. Emmerich relies on primary sources like autobiographies and first-hand accounts from novels rather than textbooks, because he says they often portray a slanted reality.
I believe you're actually doing a disservice to those individuals that were enslaved. And I think that I approach this that I want to give them a voice.
And like the images on his walls, he wants the perspectives of the enslaved standing beside, not behind, those who had a voice or those whose voices were the loudest. The Southern Poverty Law Center found most teachers are serious about teaching slavery as accurately as possible. But many states fail to set high content standards to assure it's happening. In the state of Ohio, where Mr. Emmerich teaches, there are only a few requirements. In fact, the word slavery is only mentioned 3 times in the state's nearly 50-page content standards guide, once in 4th grade and another 2 times in 8th grade.
I think we can look at the state standards as things that we have to hit, like that's the bare minimum that anybody should expect that our students deserve.
Dr. Merkel is the district's supervisor of equity. She's constantly reviewing and revising curriculums to make sure they're representative of all communities. And she admits they are still working to fill some gaps in their lessons about slavery, but says ultimately it'll take teachers like Emmerich to highlight what still needs to change.
But we're reading this like an historian. We're questioning everything.
My goal would be for all of our teachers to feel that same level of confidence and preparedness to be able to tackle that with their students, because we know that they can handle it and that they deserve it.
So I wonder, for kids that are in other classes, is there a concern that they're not getting all of that context that maybe Mr. Emmerich's students are going to get?
You know, I think that that's an interesting question. I believe that, all of our teachers are doing right now the best that they can for their students.
81% of the families that make up the small towns that come together to create the Olentangy local school district are white. And they make a median income of $126,000. That's double the state's average of $54,000. So you could argue that this is the least likely place to do a story like this one. But Mr. Emmerich says that is exactly what makes it the perfect place.
I think you have to come with the realization that they're better than we know they are. They can handle more than people believe they can.
It's our history, and we should accept it, and we should learn about it and make sure it does not happen again.
My mom would always tell me, as a black girl in the school, I've noticed that slavery is still going on, or like racism in a kind of way. So I feel like everyone should be introduced by it.
Emmerich will be the first to tell you his lessons didn't always have this impact. But it was a message from Nelson Mandela's grandson, Ndaba Mandela, that made him think.
Because it will allow the kids to understand the true balanced history and not instill the sense of inferiority that history does today.
And I remember sitting in that room realizing that was the same history I was teaching in my class. It was a white male-dominant history.
And that made you feel what?
That I had let down how many years of students And I'd let down many students of color that I had over those years because they left my class believing that they were probably inferior through the history I was teaching. And that is something I can't get back.
But what he wants to make sure his students get is the most American story there is to tell.
And the story of the black struggle in America, that story might be the greatest story of liberty in our country's history. They know what liberty is. They can see it. They know they don't have it. And for them to go and earn it, that's a powerful story.